everyone, it's Maam Steph right here and welcome once again to my YouTube channel. Hello guys, it's Maam Steph right here and welcome to another video lesson. So for this video, we will discuss quadratic functions. And sa video na to, the most essential learning competency na kailangan nating i-address is the competency that says the learner represents a quadratic function using table of values, graph, and equation. So what is a quadratic function? A quadratic function is a function in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, or the general form where a, b, and c are real numbers and a should not be equal to 0. Familiar, di ba? So, parang kagaya lang din ng quadratic equation. Pero, ang kaibahan ng quadratic equation sa quadratic function ay one side of the quadratic equation is fixed to be equal to 0. While the quadratic function naman, meron tayong value ng y na tinatawag nating dependent variable. Bakit dependent? Kasi, makukuha lang natin ang value ng y kapag nag-assign tayo ng value ng x. And for every different value of x, meron din siyang unique or nag-iisang corresponding value ng y, kaya siya tinawag na function. Kagaya rin ng quadratic equation class, the highest exponent of the independent variable or ng x of a quadratic function is 2. So knowing this about quadratic functions, let's try to identify quadratic functions. Given y equals 4x squared plus 2x minus 1, is this a quadratic function? Yes, it is a quadratic function. And it is in the general form, kagaya ng nasa definition natin. So in this quadratic function, we have the coefficient a equal to 4, and then we have coefficient b equal to 2, and coefficient c, which is the constant, is equal to negative 1. How about y equals x squared plus 3? Yes, it is still a quadratic function, although may dalawang terms lang. We have the quadratic term and the constant term. Ibig sabihin, the coefficient a is equal to 1, while the coefficient b, which is found in our linear term, is 0. And then our coefficient c, or the constant term, is equal to positive 3. How about this function? Is this a quadratic function? Yes, it is still a quadratic function kahit nag-iisang term lang siya. Kasi, diba, based sa definition natin ng quadratic function, the coefficients are real numbers. So, b and c can be equal to 0, but the coefficient a won't be equal to 0. Kaya naman, for the coefficient a, we have negative 2, while for coefficient b and c are both 0. How about this function? It is not a quadratic function because the highest exponent of the independent variable x is 3. How about this function? Still, it is not a quadratic function because the highest exponent of the independent variable x is only 1. This function is also not a quadratic function since the exponent is a variable. How about this function? Y equals the quantity of x minus 1 times the quantity of x minus 3. Now, how about this function? Yes, it is a quadratic function because if we're going to simplify this function, we will have x squared minus 4x plus 3 via FOIL method. And the coefficients a equals 1, b equals negative 4, and c equals positive 3. So now, I hope you already know what to look for to identify a quadratic function if given an equation. Now let's focus on the dependent and independent variable. In the following examples, x will be our independent and y is our dependent variable. Now, given these two functions, we will complete the table of values for each. Observe that the first function is a linear function and that the other one is a quadratic function. Also take note that the assigned values of the independent variables are consecutive values or magkasunod. So to complete this table of values, we will just get the value of x and then substitute that to our function to be able to get the value of y. So example for the first function, which is f of x equals 2x plus 1, we have f of negative 3. So f of x is still y, the value of y. Okay? So f of negative 3, meaning we take the value of negative 3 and replace x. So we have 2 times negative 3 plus 1. That will be equal to, this is 2 times 3, negative 3, that's negative 6, plus 1, that will be negative 5. And that is our y value. Now when it comes to the other one, so g of x, still y, we take g of negative 3. So we have negative 3 squared plus 2 times negative 3 minus 1. So g of negative 3, that will be, this one is 9. And 2 times negative 3, that will be negative 6. And then minus 1. So our g of negative 3 is equal to positive 2. So our y value, if x is negative 3, that will be 2. So if you wish, you can pause this video and continue solving for the values of y on your own. So this is now the complete table of value if we continue to solve for the y values. So it is said that in a quadratic function, equal differences in the independent variable x. Okay, so ibig sabihin, yung differences ng mga variable x natin, yung ginawa natin kanina, okay, which is 1, so on, produces equal second differences in the dependent variable. That is for the quadratic function. So to illustrate, let's first take a look at our independent variable. Of course, since consecutive, all the differences here is 1. And let's first have the first difference. Kunin muna natin ang first difference. So if we're going to subtract 2 from negative 1, this will be negative 1 minus 2, that will be negative 3. And then we have negative 2 minus negative 1, that is negative 1. And then we have here negative 1 minus negative 2, that is positive 1. And we have 2 minus negative 1, that will be 3. Here, 7 minus 2, that will be 5. And then 14 minus 7, that is 7. So that's the first difference. How about the second difference? So bakit natin kailangan kunin ang second difference? Because that will prove that the function that represents this table of values is a quadratic function. So kailangan natin kunin yung second difference. Okay. So dito natin kukunin ang second difference. We have negative 1 minus negative 3. That is positive 2. 1 minus negative 1, that's positive 2. 3 minus 1, positive 2. 5 minus 3, that's positive 2. And 7 minus 5, still that's positive 2. Now, unlike a linear function, wherein sa first difference pa lang, makakakuha na tayo agad ng equal difference. So we have negative 3 minus negative 5, that will be positive 2. Negative 1 minus negative 3, still positive 2. And positive 2, so on. Okay. So yan yung kaibahan ng table of values of a linear function to the table of values of a quadratic function. So now let's try to identify table of values that represents quadratic function. How about this table of value? Does it represent a quadratic function? No. So paano natin malalaman? Again, we take first the first difference, given that the values of our independent variable are consecutive, meaning yung difference din nila is magkapareho. Okay? So here we have 0 minus negative 1, that will be 1. 1 minus 0 is 1. 2 minus 1, 1. And 3 minus 2 is still 1. So, sa first difference, equal na agad. Therefore, this is not a quadratic. How about this table of values? Yes, it is a quadratic function. So looking at our independent variable, the values have differences that are equal. And then, for the first difference, we have 1 minus 4, that will be negative 3. And then 0 minus 1, that is negative 1. And then 1 minus 0, that will be 1. And then 4 minus 1, that is 3. And let's move to its second difference. So, negative 1 minus negative 3, that will be positive 2. 1 minus negative 1, that is still positive 2. And 3 minus 1, that is positive. How about this table of values? So if your answer is no, then you are correct. This table does not represent a quadratic function. How about this table of values? The answer is yes, it represents a quadratic function.